about you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's boss in the building about you.
Shout out to Sauce the boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man? Shout out to Sauce the boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man? Shout out to Sauce the boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man?
Was a symbol of some sort of success.
Leyenda del Charro Negro. A lot of people have a lot of different stories of what they've heard and stuff. Basically, the Charro Negro is like if you're walking outside in the street of Mexico and stuff, late at night, if you see a horse,
a black horse specifically,
a black horse with a guy riding it, bro, but he's a charro, basically like a Mexican cowboy dressed in all black, and obviously wants to take your soul.
Yeah.
Comes up to you, offers you a bunch of gold, riches for your soul. If you agree, he gives you the gold. If you don't, then the fucking just goes away and you're good. That's an urban legend that you hear a lot in like the whole Mexican household and shit. I have heard that multiple family members of mine, specifically my great grandpa, how like he would go out and drink a lot and he would hear and like see the Charro Negro.
Did it offer
there's always a box of gold, like a fucking treasure chest. And allegedly, like my great grandpa was mad grosero, so he would always be like, "Vete a la chingada, get the fuck out of here, motherfucker." But he was drunk and shit. But it's good that he didn't accept, bro.
Yeah, because it would have got his soul. Yeah,
curse the whole family or some shit. Yeah, bro. You never know.
Today, authorities found the rotting bodies of Francis and Donald Fox Sr. inside of their family home. They had been shot in the head and killed by their own son right before he turned the gun on himself and took his own life.
To this day, there is no motive for the murder. It appears to have been completely random.
He took a shotgun, shot his dad while he was in bed, shot his mom in the dining room, and went into his bedroom and shot himself. The bodies weren't found for days, and there was just blood everywhere. In 2016, it was a violent incident. There was so much blood that they had to move the individual into the dining room. And we started ripping up flooring, and we uncovered the stain.
Why did he murder his parents?
Hopefully you guys can figure that out, because no one really knows why.
The woman who died here most recently, that case is still open.
That case is still open. All right, Junior, I'm coming in, bringing friends.
This is the sword that was used on the attack. Blood was splattered throughout the house.
Shot himself.
I'm very lonely here.
Oh. This whole thing is actually blood. Yep, this is the murder weapon.
This is one of the worst ways somebody has ever died. In October 2012, an awful and disturbing thing happened. A 62-year-old employee at Bumblebee Foods named Jose Molina was having a normal day in the Bumblebee facility in California. In his schedule, Jose was tasked with the performance maintenance on an 11-meter-long industrial oven, so he went inside one of the tanks to begin his work. Believing that Jose was in the bathroom, one of his coworkers actually shut the tank's door, trapping Jose inside, and then filled the oven with 5,400 kilograms of tuna and then turned the oven on. A search then ensued when the manager realized Jose was missing, but by then it was way too late. They found Jose's body 2 hours later inside the oven, completely burnt and melted away, 100% unrecognizable. The temperature inside the oven reached 270 degrees Fahrenheit, and Jose was unfortunately cooked alive inside of the tank with all the fish. And you could only imagine how horrific this death actually was. Could you imagine being cooked alive and then being crushed by tens of thousands of pounds of fish, mixed with the smell, the texture, the heat? This death was just awful. The company Bumblebee and two managers were actually charged for this death, and the company got off with a $6 million settlement. But do you think $6 million is way too low for a death like this? Many people believe it should have been more close to $50 million. Nonetheless, this is by far one of the worst and most uncomfortable deaths of all time, and I can't imagine Jose's thoughts as he was being cooked alive with hundreds of fish.
Happy Lag BaOmer, guys. I hope you're all having an amazing time. Well, we couldn't go anywhere because of the current situation, but we are having an epic time. Offshore fired up the grill, and the kids are just playing.
The man you just saw in that video is a pedophile, and he abused his own adopted children. So this guy is from Houston, Texas, and online he went by the name Haim Nassim Cohen. So he claimed on social media that he was a Hasidic Jew born in Brooklyn, New York. But in reality, his real name was Jeffrey Lujan Vihil, and he was born here in Texas. But we're going to call him Haim for the rest of this TikTok. So Haim was big on social media. His TikTok had a big following because he adopted 9 sons. And people all across the internet praised Haim for his thoughtless actions and how he was helping change these boys' lives. In the videos, he was always surrounded by his sons. They were playing games, doing challenges. But then in February of 2023, one of Haim's sons went to a podcast anonymously and reported that he was being abused by his own father. And that's when disturbing facts started to come to light, like the fact that Haim was already out from a 2019 case that he was fighting involving child abuse as well. Eventually, 6 in total of the children came forward and said that they were SA'd and abused by their own father, who, like I said before, is a stone-cold pedophile. One of the young victims even claimed that his adopted father would pepper spray him in the face until he submitted to the abuse. Prosecutors also said that this dirty dad kept his children locked up in their bedrooms until 4 p.m. almost every day, and he would only let them out if they were going to perform acts for him. Haim's son, who went on the podcast, also claimed that everything that he did was fake. He said that he only sat in a wheelchair when other people came around. He only brought out oxygen tanks when other people were around, and that he was the most manipulative, biggest liar he's ever known. Thankfully, this guy is behind bars now. What a horrific story. But if you were to just look at the family's social media, you would have no idea that this was happening behind the scenes. Only God knows how frequently this is happening right now in America.
La leyenda de la lechuza.
Okay.
You see how they say that witches are lechuzas, owls, or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's kind of also a symbol of bad luck if you see an owl, especially in the daytime or whatever. And this was in a small town in Mexico, that there was this lady who they would call her La Lechuza, but she was a witch. She would perform a lot of like rituals and shit until eventually they caught her. So they decided to kill her. Right before they're about to kill her, she sees an owl flying on top of her. And she basically curses them and says that she will come back in the form of an owl and kill everybody and get revenge. So the legend is that in the middle of the night she would come. If you see an owl, that it's La Lechuza. And basically what she does is that she shapeshifts from an owl into a regular lady, a witch, and she kills you in the middle of the night.
I didn't know that it was bad luck if you see it in daytime.
I mean, there's different beliefs. A lot of people have different ways of seeing it, like everything else. There's some people who say that it's a sign of good luck. If you see it, that means that there's big changes coming in your life. It also means like wisdom and knowledge and stuff like that. But from what I've heard is that it's basically like death is around, like death is near.
You ever experienced seeing like an owl?
I seen an owl when I was younger. But it has what? Oh my God. Holy shit. Frightening. It just said frightening on the thing, and he's actually thrown out. I think we need to stop and get out. Okay, this, yeah, we need to stop. Let's get the out of here. Are you okay?
No, man.
All right, let's stop.
Yeah, let's stop.
Whatever spirits are out here, you can't follow us.
Yeah, no one's following us. Leave us alone. We were trying to talk to someone that wasn't you.
I'm shutting all this off. I'm fucking scared.
I'm just shutting everything off. Like, I don't want to.
You're not allowed to communicate with us from this point forward. Stay away from us. Stay away from us.
Drain. It just said drain and terrified.
The mother of the Uvalde school shooter was arrested last year after making death threats herself. And this seems to be an alarming pattern of behavior in this family. So if you don't remember, in 2022, this man went into the Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, and opened fire, killing 21 people altogether, 19 young children and 2 teachers. This was one of the most horrific events to ever really happen here in the United States. It sent shockwaves around the world. And those 21 students and teachers that lost their lives that day will never be forgotten. But in January of 2023, Salvador Ramos, the shooter's mother, Adriana Reyes, spent 2 nights in jail for threatening to murder her disabled partner that she lived with. Apparently, the man that she was dating stated that he felt terrified and felt like she could kill him at any second, and that's why he called the police to report her. Now, initially, she tried to claim that this never happened, but somebody who was a witness to these threats, who actually heard her screaming these death threats, corroborated the story with the police, and she was arrested. And if you'll remember, Salvador Ramos's cousin actually threatened to do the same thing as his cousin, aka he threatened to commit another shooting last year as well. And needless to say, I think that there's just something wrong here. This week on our podcast, my wife Courtney and I are starting our series about the Uvalde school shooting. Our podcast is called Murder in America, and we're going through everything that led up to this, the police failures, the massacre itself, and obviously everything that happened afterwards.
A hooded man was spotted near this woman's house in York, and then she vanished. It was March 2009. 35-year-old Claudia Lawrence was working at the University of York as a chef. She lived in Heworth and was a beautiful and well-liked woman. The day before she vanished, she spoke to her mum, Joan, on the phone. They had a perfectly normal conversation about stuff that had been on TV that day, and they arranged to see each other the following week. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The following day, though, on the 19th of March, Claudia disappeared. Now, it was incredibly strange for her to just vanish without contacting her friends or family. It was also very strange that she didn't show up at work that day. Her dad called police, who immediately started looking into where she could have gone. They scoured CCTV of the local area and they found a particularly harrowing clip. It was a hooded figure entering and then leaving an alleyway near to Claudia's home. Now, this was around 7:15 p.m. the night that she seemingly disappeared. Frustratingly, it wasn't possible for police to identify the figure from the image. Officers then started looking into the possibility that Claudia might have had some enemies that wanted to do her harm. Interestingly, it was revealed that Claudia had been seeing a married man. Could this have indicated a motive for somebody to want to hurt her? Over the years, teams of divers, search dogs, and forensic experts have scoured the area to try and find any sign of her. Police believe that she was murdered, but no body has ever been found. Tragically, in 2021, her dad passed away without ever knowing what happened to his daughter. Now, someone must know something about Claudia's disappearance. She would be 50 this year if she were alive today.
Real life Jeepers Creepers.
Like the movie?
Yes, the movie, 2001 movie, was based on a real life story. Specifically, the beginning of the movie.
Like when he's driving down his pickup truck or
So
something.
the movie's writer and director Victor Salva, he took inspiration from an incident that happened in 1990 in Michigan. Everything starts off with brother and sister Ray and Mary Thornton. They were just out on a regular Sunday on a drive. They were just vibing and they were playing a game where they would read license plates of passing cars and they would have to name a phrase starting with either the beginning letter of the license plate, or if it says something, they make a word out of the license plate. And then a van ends up speeding past them. Like, they just brushed it off. They didn't think anything of it until a couple minutes after they end up seeing this old schoolhouse, and that same van that sped past them is parked there now. But this time they see the man was carrying a white bedsheet that was covered in blood, not realizing that at the time they had come in contact with a man named Dennis Depew, who had killed his wife and was trying to dispose of the body near that schoolhouse. And the way they found him was crazy as well. The only reason why they found him was because of an episode of a show called Unsolved Mysteries. I don't know if you ever heard about that show.
I heard about that show.
It's a very, very popular show that people watched back in the day, and even till this day. Basically,
a child carried out a copycat 9/11 attack, and I feel like no one knows about it. It was the 5th of January 2002. In the aftermath of the horrific 9/11 attacks on America, people were on high alert for a copycat attack. High school student Charles J. Bishop was in fact one of those who wanted to recreate the horrific events of that day. He attended East Lake High School in Tarpon Springs, Florida. Now, the 15-year-old had been taking flying lessons. On the day in question, he was unfortunately left alone in a light aircraft. Taking his chance, Charles started the engine without permission and flew off in the plane. Terrifyingly, he flew towards the Bank of America Tower in downtown Tampa. Air traffic control were immediately notified, and they dispatched a helicopter to try and warn him to land the plane. Despite this, though, he was determined to carry out a horrific tragedy. He flew the plane straight into the building. The plane hit the 29th floor of the 42-story building. This killed Charles instantly. Now, thankfully, nobody else was killed in this incident, and the building remained structurally intact, apart from obviously some damage to one of the offices. Charles had left a self-unaliving note stating his support for certain groups and organizations, which I won't name on this app. I feel like you can probably guess who I'm referring to. We know very little about what caused Charles to want to do something so horrific. Bizarrely, though, Charles's mum tried to sue the company that make Accutane. It's believed that the teenager was taking this for his acne. His mum blamed them for causing side effects such as depression, which she felt contributed to his actions that day.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
This is a terrible situation that should have never have happened. Ricardo Flores was a 21-year-old man from a small village in Mexico. Ricardo was a student of law and his parents worked in the United States to help him with his funds. Because of this, Ricardo lived with his grandmother. Ricardo's goal in life was to become a lawyer and earn enough money so his parents could return from the United States. On August 29, 2018, Ricardo's uncle Alberto asked if he would like to come with him to a nearby village to pick up some building materials. Ricardo said yes and got into Alberto's SUV and they drove off to the village. But in a horrifying coincidence, messages have been going around on the app called WhatsApp about two men in a SUV that were out looking to kidnap children. And of course, these rumors created a lot of fear in this village. And as we know, fear can make people do the absolute worst thing. Ricardo and Alberto parked not too far away from a school and drank a few beers, totally unaware of these rumors going around. The WhatsApp message said, "Please, everyone be aware, because a plague of child kidnappers have entered the country. It appears these criminals are involved in organ trafficking. In the past couple of days, a number of children have disappeared. Parents, please pay attention." So when two strangers enter the village in a SUV parked not too far from a school, villagers had firmly believed they found who was responsible. Villagers gathered around and approached Ricardo and Alberto in the car and accused them of being kidnappers and dragged them from their car and began to beat them. The police were alerted and arrived at the scene to see what was happening. Ricardo and Alberto were then taken to a police station 20 minutes away from the village. They were brought in for disturbing the peace due to the large crowd that had gathered around them, and they were kept there to be protected until the police knew what was going on. But the angry crowd had gathered around the police station, and in that crowd was a man named Francisco Martinez, who started a Facebook live stream on his phone. During this live stream, Francisco told his followers to come give their support and said, "Believe me, the kidnappers are here." Some villagers then climbed the town hall building and rang the bell to attract more villagers. They did this to spread the news that the kidnappers were caught. It was then found out that the police were going to release Ricardo and Alberto, which only angered the crowd more. One person in the crowd then got a loudspeaker and told people to use their money to get petrol from a gas station and take justice into their own hands. At this time, more than 100 people were gathered right outside the police station, shouting for the men to be killed on the spot. The police then made a statement saying the two men weren't kidnappers and that they had been misled. But in the village, the trust with the police wasn't the best, so they obviously didn't believe them. The crowd then bursted into the police station and dragged Ricardo and Alberto out of their cells and began to beat them very badly. Ricardo's cousin Joanna was alerted of the situation and went to the scene as fast as possible. She was crying and trying her best to convince the mob that they were innocent and that there has been a huge misunderstanding. The mob didn't believe her and they then started chanting, "Burn them." Ricardo's mother, who was in the United States, began to get flooded by messages on Facebook. These messages said that her son was arrested and suspected of being a kidnapper. She refused to believe this and clicked on one of the links she was sent. The link then brought her to one of the live streams of one of the people in the crowd filming the beating. All she could do was watch as she saw her son and brother-in-law being beaten by multiple people. She commented on the live stream, begging the mob to leave them alone, but of course this had no effect. Alberto's wife was also sent a link and she had to watch her husband be brutally beaten. The mob then started pouring petrol on the two men. Those who were in the crowd will later say that by the time petrol was poured onto them, Ricardo had already died from the beating, although Alberto was very much alive as they set both of them on fire. One person who witnessed the horrific situation said every time the fire went out, the mob would quickly start pouring more petrol. Smoke from the fire could be seen from any part of the village. The crowd cheered, believing they just saved the world from two evil people, but that's not the truth at all. The truth is, Ricardo and Alberto were totally innocent. For 2 hours, the crowd stayed at the scene, standing around the two charred men and taking photos. Ricardo's grandmother was then called to the scene and was asked to identify their bodies, which is just horrific. Not long after the two men died, it was confirmed they did nothing wrong. Those who were directly responsible fled the village to avoid being arrested. What is especially tragic is that Alberto had 3 daughters who were now fatherless. On August 30th, a day after the brutal murder, a funeral was held for Ricardo and Alberto, and it's believed that a number of people who were in the crowd during the murder were present. It also turns out that the messages that were circulating on WhatsApp were absolutely fake. It was fake news, and nobody checked to see if the news was legit. This case is just so sad and honestly very brutal. Mob justices like this are common, but this one really stands out to me. Isn't it also crazy that nobody wanted to hear and listen when they were killing criminals, but when they were the criminals, they fled? There's many pictures and videos online showing this tragedy, but as always, I recommend not to watch them or look at them because it is truly awful. It's sad seeing 2 men being killed and burnt in this way, especially with the whole crowd recording and cheering, watching the situation with delight. May Ricardo and Alberto rest in peace.
Sometimes through stranger non-fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
This one is called the Oakland County Child Killer, and it's still an unsolved mystery. The killer has never been caught. Nobody knows who the killer is. There was a killing spree for kids, ages from 10, 11, and 12. The thing about this, right? They were all found in public areas. They were either shot or strangled to death. And before they died, like autopsy and stuff like that showed that they were like nurtured and cared for before they died. Like they were bathed before they were killed. And like investigators are saying how like could be like some sick parent instinct. Like once that happened, they started creating a bunch of composite sketches, what the guys could have looked like. Okay. I do have 2 suspects that could be linked to this.
How did they get the suspects though?
Okay, so one of them, Archibald Edward Sloan. The reason why he was a suspect or whatever, because he was a known child molester, and they had investigated him. And in his car, they found like hairs that belonged to 2 of the boys. And there was other hair in the vehicle too that didn't belong to him. So they basically said like, nah, it can't be him. So
how does that make sense though?
He could have been like an accomplice. But then there's another one named Chris Bush. Before one of the kids went missing, he was arrested and investigated for CP charges. And then, and I think a couple years after, he ends up allegedly, but the way the crime scene looked,
like a fake.
When they went in his house to investigate, there was no blood in the scene. His body was fully wrapped around, even his head. And then I have a picture that they took of his room, and there was something in the picture that kind of linked everything together. Right here on the left side, it's a hand drawing, and it's this picture. And they're saying that it could be this kid.
He's like screaming type shit, right?
And police reports, that picture was never reported or anything. Like nobody knew about it.
They probably didn't even think about it.
Or do you think like they were low key in on it?
When a woman vanished from her apartment, Google Maps would reveal a horrific murder. Maribel Ramos was 36 years old when she vanished. She'd been a tomboy growing up, and she joined the US Army after high school. She was honorably discharged in 2008. When she moved back to America, she decided to move in with her mum in Orange County. She attended California State University to, ironically, study criminal justice. Sadly, her mum passed away in 2009, so she was left living alone. She wanted a roommate to cheer the place up and help her pay her bills. Unfortunately, this decision would end up being fatal. Maribel decided to advertise on Craigslist, which is kind of an American version of like eBay. Now, Casey Joy messaged Maribel and said that he was looking for someone to move in with. He said he was easygoing and he needed a place locally for his work. Maribel and her sister met up with Casey to just suss him out and see what he was like. They both felt he was a very nice guy. They even felt a bit sorry for him, which was exacerbated when he moved in. They noticed he rarely left the apartment, so Maribel kind of took him under her wing and started doing like food shops and going on walks with him. She wanted to keep him company in the absence of him having any friends. However, Casey soon got the wrong end of the stick. He admitted to Maribel's sister that he was in love with Maribel. Now, her sister was alarmed and said, "I'm sorry, you've got it wrong. She's not really interested like that. When Maribel heard about this of her sister, she also tried to nip things in the bud with Casey. However, although at first he seemed to take the rejection quite well, things would take a very dark turn. He started to do things very out of character, including spending a hell of a lot of money on plastic surgery to make him look different. He was clearly obsessed with her and wanted to do anything to increase his chances. On the 3rd of May 2013, Maribel was due to attend a softball game but never showed up. Her loved ones tried and failed to get in contact with her, and when they turned up to her apartment, she wasn't there. Police were informed and they scoured CCTV of the local area. They spotted her on video at 7:15 the night before she vanished. Now, Casey was interestingly the last person to see her. He told police that that night they'd had an argument, he left, went for a drive. When he came back to the apartment, she'd gone. Police then started looking into the records that they had for Casey. He was found to have a violent past, with his own sister even filing a restraining order against him. Interestingly, they also found a documented phone call from Maribel 12 days before her disappearance. This was a call to 911 in which she stated in a panic, "I'm just calling to let you guys know that if something happens that I did it because I was trying to defend myself." She told them on the call she was fearful of her roommate. They then worryingly discovered that Maribel had been trying to evict Casey from the property. He'd stopped paying towards the bills and it was just getting really awkward between the pair. Now, Maribel had been chatting to a man on a dating site called Paul Lopez. Paul actually offered to help Maribel out and helped to encourage Casey to leave the property. He said he would speak to him, which he did. However, his attempt was in vain. Now, Maribel was still missing. Casey, meanwhile, was trying to look like a grieving friend, but he was strangely not helping in the search for her. He also wasn't attending any of the candlelit vigils that they were holding in the local area to pay respects to her. Police started keeping an eye on him and seeing what he was up to. They noticed him attending a lot of internet cafes. They decided to have a look at the public computer that he was using. What they found was key to cracking the case. He was searching extremely suspicious things like how long does it take a body to decay? Now, by this point, they were following his every move and they were even tracking the computer that he was on and watched him go on Google Maps and search for a very specific tree. He zoomed into the location and then logged out. They knew they had to go to this tree. When they got to the location, they found Maribel's body. Casey had buried her in a shallow grave. Unfortunately, she had decomposed so much that they couldn't really determine her cause of death. They did, however, arrest Casey. He was found guilty of murder and given 15 years to life in prison.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all remember this viral video of a girl on a plane completely freaking out, saying she wants to get off because the person she just saw wasn't human. But what if I told you some guy just did the same exact thing a couple days ago? Just watch this video and let's talk about it. So yeah, that guy claims that he saw a shapeshifter on the plane, and he instantly got up freaking out and tried to open the plane door while they're in the air. This video is absolutely insane, and what's going on recently with all these videos of people on planes seeing shapeshifters and things that aren't human?
This horrific shooting took the lives of 3 people, including 2 children. A tragic shooting took place at the end of May this year that stunned Pennsylvania. 2 young boys were innocently playing in their garden with kittens when they were killed by gunfire. The 2 young victims were brothers called Jesus and Sebastian Perez Salome. They were only 8 and 9 years old, and their mum was working at a shop nearby when this occurred. She actually heard the gunshots while she was at work, and she was completely unaware that her boys were anything to do with this. When she found out, she was in complete shock. A 19-year-old called Joshua was also killed in the incident, and he was apparently the target due to an alleged argument. A 33-year-old neighbor was also hit by a stray bullet and had to undergo surgery. Police arrested Ivan Rosero in North Philadelphia. Alex Santos and a 16-year-old male were also arrested. It's believed that the district attorney is seeking the death penalty for the shooters.
Everybody needs to watch this video. Okay, so we all remember this dress that broke the internet. Some people think it's white and gold, others think it's blue and black. But the man behind this dress actually has been charged with the attempted murder of his wife. 38-year-old Keir Johnston allegedly committed an 11-year-old campaign of domestic violence actions and control against his wife, all leading up to a moment last March in which he allegedly attempted to kill her by pinning her to the ground and compressing her neck. Keir Johnston has denied all allegations against him at this time, and the attempted murder case will have its preliminary hearing before a trial in 2024. This is actually crazy because this is one of the first things that ever go viral on the internet, and the person behind it was literally just charged with the attempted murder of his wife. So do you think Keir Johnston tried to kill his wife? Or do you think he's innocent? Let me know your opinions on this whole case in the comments, because this is absolutely mind-blowing to me, and I bet it is to a lot of you guys also. And one last time, is the dress white and gold or blue and black? These are videos you need to see before you die. Okay, so did you know when a whale dies, it sometimes falls to the bottom of the ocean floor called a whale fall, and their corpse creates a complex ecosystem for countless deep-sea organisms. Well, the video I'm about to show you is exactly that, which a research submarine discovered, and it shows many organisms enjoying this whale's homemade ecosystem. Here's the video, and it's crazy.
Whale fall. Here we go, baby. Okay,
Yeah, dinner is served.
Look at
that's not bacterial, man.
No, they are worms. Look at the blubber on the right side. Yeah.
It's not even digested all the way. This is so
Definitely, where food is so limited, I would imagine scavenging is a great strategy. Your food doesn't run away.
So yeah, isn't that video so fascinating? It's crazy to me how life can just end for one, but even after death, they can still help. These are photos that go unseen by most people, part 1. Up first is what a gasoline container looks like underneath a gas station. And let me guess, some of you thought the gas was just unlimited at gas stations. Well, it's not, and it's actually stored in these giant containers underneath the gas station. Next up, if you're a boy, you definitely shaved. But did you know this is what the inner workings of shaving cream looks like? This is actually crazy, and if you didn't, now you do. Next up is what the inside of a bungee cord looks like. I've never been on a bungee cord, and I don't think I ever will, but just looking at this photo is kind of unsettling for some reason. I think it's because there's so much little cords all next to each other. Next up is what a movie theater looks like with no seats or screen in it. This is so unsettling, and it looks like the opening scene of a horror movie. Next up, did you ever wonder what the inside of a bowling pin looks like? Well, if so, it's actually just wood. This completely blew my mind when I looked this up, because I never knew what was in bowling pins, but I would have never guessed it was wood. So who else's mind is blown?
Police officer crushed my head and killed me while I was shouting that I couldn't breathe. My name is George Floyd. I am a 46-year-old African-American man. It all started when I entered a convenience store. I was accused of using a counterfeit bill for a purchase, which led to a call to the police. When the officers arrived, I was arrested and handcuffed. That's when my life took a turn. They pinned me to the ground, face down. I tried to cooperate as best as I could, but my life was in their hands. Derek Chauvin, one of the officers, came and knelt on me, pressing his knee against my neck. I found myself trapped, unable to move, to breathe. I cried that I couldn't breathe repeatedly for 10 minutes, which felt like an eternity to me. I felt life gradually leaving me. My vision darkened, and I lost consciousness. The last thing I felt was fear and pain, but also a profound sense of injustice. People took to the streets to demand justice for me and to denounce police brutality and the systemic racism that has existed for far too long.
Kidnapped and killed many children to eat them. My name is Albert Fish, and I'm an American man who committed atrocious crimes from the 1920s to 1936. One of my most infamous crimes was that of little Grace Budd. I pretended to be a man named Frank Howard and convinced her family to let me take Grace with me to a supposed job. They trusted me. They suspected nothing. I took her to a secluded little cabin I'd prepared for the occasion. Once there, I revealed my true nature. I tied up the poor child. She cried and screamed, but that only added to my sick pleasure. I subjected Grace to unimaginable torture, abominable sexual abuse. Her suffering was my delight. After days of terror for her, I finally ended her life. I committed the most heinous act imaginable. I killed and dismembered Grace Budd and ate her body parts. Her mutilated body was an offering to my inner demons. After this horrible crime, I wrote a detailed letter to the Budd family, describing the horror I had inflicted on their precious Grace. Yet this crime was only a small part of all the atrocities I had committed. I was then arrested and confessed all my crimes to the police, leading to my execution in the electric chair in 1936.
When this man experienced a break-in, he killed the intruder and then lived with his mummified corpse. Bruce Roberts lived in Sydney and he was known for being a hoarder. However, no one could have guessed one incredibly disturbing possession he was keeping at his home. Neighbours described Bruce as reclusive. His home was so full of junk that you could not see through the windows. When locals in 2017 hadn't heard from Bruce for a while, they called police to do a welfare check. When police managed to enter the house, they found Bruce deceased inside. However, it would be another year before they realised there was actually another body in the property. Police would have probably found this body if this was a normal house, but this wasn't a normal house. It was actually when cleaners were brought in to prep Bruce's house for sale that they found the other body. This was the body of 39-year-old Shane Snellman. Now, Shane had apparently been released from prison in 2002 and had gone to Bruce's house to rob it for money for drugs. A coroner found that Bruce had shot the intruder, covered his body with a rug, and then kept it in his spare bedroom for 15 years. He ended up using 70 bottles of air freshener to try and hide the smell of rotting flesh. This TV show ended up playing a part in and even filming a deadly shooting. The TV show To Catch a Predator had one aim: to catch online predators. The show aired from 2004 to 2007 and was very successful in terms of ratings. The production company hired actors to play the role of children on the internet and would lure in child predators. Posing as children, they would arrange to meet the adult males. Then when the adults showed up, a camera crew lay in wait. The presenter, Chris Hansen, would confront the males and then ultimately they would be arrested. By 2007, the show had helped to catch hundreds of potential predators. They had got 36 guilty verdicts. In 2006, Bill Conrad was an assistant district attorney from Texas. His friends described him as reserved and he had never been married. In this particular sting, a house in Texas was fitted with live video feeds. High-tech equipment was installed and police officers stayed in the house waiting to lure in potential predators. Now, weeks prior to this, Bill had actually been talking to a minor online. He'd been pretending to be a college student, but eventually slipped up and revealed his true identity. The TV show in Texas tried luring Bill into the house, but they failed, so they took matters into their own hands. Chris Hansen and the crew turned up at Bill's house, ready to catch him unaware. However, Bill wasn't answering the door. Police ended up calling a SWAT team in. As they forced entry into the house, Bill shot himself in the head. One of the officers reportedly said into the camera, "That'll make good TV."
The story of the preppy rapist will infuriate you, and it demonstrates just how power and privilege can lead to complete injustice. This man's name right here is Alex Kelly, and he was born in Connecticut in the year 1967. And before he even turned 20, he was charged with 2 extremely disturbing crimes. Over a 4-day period in Connecticut, he was charged with committing 2 different rapes. First, he allegedly assaulted a 16-year-old girl from Stamford, and he also kidnapped one of his victims. He offered them a ride home and then took them somewhere and assaulted them. But in the year 1987, just before his trial was set to start, Alex escaped the country. Yes, somehow he evaded justice and he fled to Europe. And for 7 whole years, Alex was able to live in Europe. He faced no repercussions for his actions, and his parents even sent him money and helped hide him. One day, though, law enforcement knocked on his parents' door, raided their house, and found photos of the family with Alex in Europe from the previous year. And at that point, they were arrested and charged with obstruction of justice, and Alex finally came back to America. After a lengthy trial process, some of his charges were downgraded, but he was eventually sentenced to 32 years in prison. But after just 8 years, he was up for parole. He applied for parole, but they denied it. And at this parole hearing, he said that he realized he was hyper-competitive and self-centered, and he realized that the world was bigger than himself, which I think is just so douchey. But just 10 years into his 32-year sentence, Alex was released in the year 2007. And I feel like that was very, very quickly. So many other people would not get released 10 years into a 32-year sentence, but Alex was. And if I didn't iterate this enough before, the crimes that he committed were absolutely horrific. The victims were completely traumatized for the rest of their lives. And some of the details I just can't share on TikTok because they were so graphic, but you can go look them up and research this case if you want to yourself. But yeah, after sexually assaulting 2 underage girls, kidnapping one of them, fleeing justice for 7 years, he only had to serve 10 years in prison. But nowadays, Alex works as a skydiving instructor. He has a skydiving service. So if you want to go skydive with a rapist, hit this company up.
Could you get away with a serious crime because one of your other personalities was to blame? Well, this man did get acquitted because psychiatrists believed that his other personalities were to blame for his crimes. Billy Milligan had trauma from an early age. His dad unalived himself when Billy was just 4 years old. His mum then remarried and his stepdad abused him. He SA'd him and threatened to bury Billy alive if he ever told anyone. Over the years, Billy developed 9 different personalities of different ages and genders. Some of the personalities began to get violent. In 1977, Billy threatened a female student with a gun. He lured her into the woods, SA'd her, and robbed her. Just days later, he struck again. He attacked a total of 3 women. Luckily, after the 3rd attack, the victim recognized him from police mugshots. Police actually had photos of Billy on file from a 1975 robbery. Billy was arrested. Now, police remarked that while he was in custody, sometimes when talking to Billy, it seemed like you were talking to different people. Sometimes he referred to himself as Phil, sometimes as David, sometimes he spoke with different accents, and other times he claimed to be Jewish. When a psychiatrist referred to him as Billy, Billy stated, "Billy's asleep, this is David." It was determined that Billy had about 10 different personalities. They ranged from a 3-year-old girl to a man named Arthur who was responsible for clearing up the mess of all of the other different personalities. It became apparent that 23-year-old Reagan was the personality responsible for robbing the victims. Now, Reagan struggled with empathy. A 19-year-old lesbian personality was responsible for the SAs. It was believed that Billy, the core personality, had been asleep for 7 years while all of this was going on. Billy was eventually found not guilty by reason of insanity. He was transferred to a hospital for the criminally insane in 1980. In 1991, he was released and he passed away from cancer in 2014.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Groomed by a man more than 3 times her age, Kellyanne Bates was only 14 when she met the man that would end her life in what still remains one of the most horrific murders in the UK. Quick trigger warning, some of the details in the video are quite graphic and hard to listen to. James Patterson Smith was an extremely violent man. On the outside, he looked perfectly normal and was actually described by friends as well-groomed and house-proud. He'd been in a few relationships before meeting Kelly, but they'd all ended due to his violent temper. He'd even tried to drown 2 of his previous girlfriends. And at the age of 46, he met 14-year-old Kelly while she was babysitting for some of his friends. Their relationship was kept a secret by Kelly and James for 2 years, but at the age of 16, when she left school, she moved in with him. When Kelly's parents finally met James, they were shocked by his age, and Kelly's mum did everything she could to try and persuade Kelly to leave the relationship. As the months went on, Kelly became more and more withdrawn, and eventually all contact between her and her family stopped. On April 16, 1996, the police received a call from James saying that he'd accidentally drowned his girlfriend in the bath. When they arrived at the house, they found blood throughout the rooms, and Kelly's naked body was in the bedroom. It became quite clear that this was not an accidental death. Kelly had drowned in the bath, but only after enduring up to a month of torture at the hands of James. Kelly had over 150 injuries in total. She'd been tied up with a ligature around her neck. She had burns to her legs, a fractured arm, multiple stab wounds from knives, scissors, and forks. Her hands were crushed. She had stab wounds inside her mouth. She'd been partially scalped, and she had 2 empty eye sockets. Kelly had endured all of these injuries in the weeks leading up to her death before finally being dragged to the bathroom and drowned. James was quickly arrested but denied murder, saying that Kelly had inflicted all these injuries on herself to make him look bad. He then changed his story and said that it was him, but that Kelly had taunted him and dared him to do it. It only took the jury 1 hour to find him guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. In January 2023, he actually became eligible for parole, but it was denied and he remains behind bars.
This former Degrassi actor is one of the worst pedophiles in Canadian history. Trigger warning, this story is extremely disturbing. It's honestly one of the worst I've read about in recent history, so viewer discretion is advised. This is Bird Dickens, born in 1971 in Ontario, Canada. Bird was an actor, and he was known for portraying a character named Scott Smith on Degrassi High. On the show, he played an abusive boyfriend, and in real life, he was just so much worse than that. A lot of Degrassi fans will remember him from his role in this show, but he also acted in a number of other productions. So after his role ended on Degrassi High in 1991, 3 different women claimed that he had sexually assaulted them. He was charged with these 3 rapes, but he was acquitted of all charges eventually. But the story got so much darker from there. In 2004, he met his future partner, Dylan Ann McEwen, and in 2016, it was discovered that he had been engaging in deplorable BDSM activities with her that involved minors. And when police executed a search warrant in April of 2016 of the couple's home, they found over 1,000 images of CP, images and videos. And each of those individual images depicted some of the most grotesque CP ever recorded. But in 2003, before he met his future wife, he was actually offered a night with a minor by a girl's mother. Apparently, the mother took nude photographs of her own daughter and mailed them to Bird, and Bird then took the girl and her mother to the movies, and then engaged in sexual activity with the young daughter while her mother sat in the same room and watched. This is just disgusting. So this investigation by the police actually uncovered thousands of CP images that were shared between Dickens and his wife, and apparently he was a major member on a lot of BDSM and fetish forums online where he found, quote, like-minded individuals that he would swap these files with. And when the police actually went through these files, I feel so bad for the people that have to actually look through this content. The case got even darker. Some of these images and videos actually showed Bird himself engaging in sexual activity with minors. He recorded these sick videos, took these photos himself, then went online and shared these images with people on the internet. Some of his screen names included the names Retro Deviant, Bird Dog, and Sir Dirk. But during this entire investigation, he continued to work in the film industry. He worked on various productions, and nobody knew that this investigation was underway. Eventually, though, in the year 2018, he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison, but there's no real justice in the story because in 2020, he was released on bail. That's right, for all of that thousands of CP images, some of which depicted himself abusing children, he only had to serve about 2.5 years in prison.
In 1912, a young boy went missing. And when he was finally reunited with his mother, it seemed like it was not the same boy. So 4-year-old Bobby Dunbar disappeared by a lake on a family vacation in 1912. The only clue found was his hat, which
Shout out to Sauce the Boss, of course, man. Who's in the building, man?
About you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive vibes only. Shout out to King Saul's Boss in the building. About you, and it's no one else like you is what they're getting. Positive